Whenever a new player joins after the Flash Mirage, most of the time they will be FRPing in some way, shape, or form. It won't be too long until a more experienced role player will try to explain that this game has rules and point out what they're doing wrong, or just bully them into leaving the game. Sometimes those players will go to the internet, or more specifically YouTube in this scenario, in search of the After the Flash rule guide. The only issue is with that though, whenever you try to find someone explaining the rules, you'll either find A, trolling as an FRPer in an attempt at comedy, B, an attempt to explain some rules while leaving out others or spreading misinformation, or C, videos that don't have anything to do with After the Flash's rules, typically about roleplaying or other popular videos at the time. I'm gonna cut the fluffy bullshit and give you what you are looking for, the facts. This is gonna function as an audiobook for all of the current rules in After the Flash. This applies to the entire series, not just Deep Six, Deep Winter, Mirage, etc., etc. These rules are the official rules inside of the Flash Storm Discord server, After the Flash's official Discord server, ran by Chad the creator of After the Flash. With all this being said, sit back, grab some water, and enjoy this audiobook. Rule number 1. No random shooting or stabbing. While the title is mostly self-explanatory, random firing is firing your weapon randomly without any action, typically more than once. The standard actions carried out to punish this are as follows: a warning via DM, a kill, a kick, and finally a temporary ban. If you proceed past your temporary ban, continuing to random fire, you will be permanently banned from the game under that offense. Some examples of random firing. Player A walks in the middle of a city and begins rapidly spraying his new Game Pass weapon. Player A shoots his weapon once every 10 seconds, trying to loophole the system. Player A wears a massive hot dog costume and sprints around firing at people while spamming LOL. Player A sprints up to player B and, being new to roleplay, fires at him and says, "You're dead." Rule 1B. Animation abuse. Using the animations for reasons such as trolling or to be generally disruptive. The in-game animations should only be used for roleplay purposes. An example of this would be running around using the fight animation without actually roleplaying that you're fighting.
Rule 2. Throwaway characters. Throwaway characters are the explicit use of characterless, undefined characters or characters switched to after dying to exploit the PTK system and avoid any repercussions of such. Most often, throwaway characters are used to troll and randomly attack players. See Rule 3 and 10. Throwaway characters can be permitted, however, during special events such as raid and admin events, it must be expressed that it is only for the parties involved and has to have limits, such as reinforcement waves or spamming as a mutant.
Rule 3. Random attack. Randomly attacking players or groups without a proper reason or motive. An example of this would be if you walked up to a man in the streets and shot him because you said that you were insane. Rule 4. Specified combat. This rule encompasses the small terms of combat and what is decidedly proper. Vague language will be used as to allow for freedom in situations. Each combat interaction is unique. It is not expected that you perform flawlessly to the rules accord, but it is expected that you listen to the admins and the rule guide on combat itself. Combat that is decidedly lazy or used to gain an unfair advantage will result in a warning, and then the normal process for moderation will persist. An example of this would be, "I kick body," or "I slap face, yes," or "I slam head." Your actions must carry detail in combat and must be easily understood by all parties involved. Adjectives and verbs that carry little meaning or are slang, such as slam for punching, can result in a warning. An example of proper actions: "I swing my fist into your cheek," or I kick the left side of his torso. Of course, this is just melee combat. Firearms combat is a completely different story and is broken down into two basic concepts: close range and long range. Close range firearms combat focuses heavily on the use of weapons, an often misunderstood item in the game. As a base, you should study firearms if you want to have a debate about it in the game, as to not make yourself look like a fool. Guns don't operate like they do in movies. A bullet's ballistics is independent to the weapon. For example, it won't make sense to say, I shoot the shotgun into them, sending them 6 feet back. This is incorrect because shotguns do not have that type of stopping power. Their velocity tends to pierce through the entire body or stop inside it, not lift a 150 to 200 pound person off their feet and send them back. Using firearms that fire multiple projectiles, aside from shotguns, such as automatic and burst rifles, require you to say where you were hit afterwards. As an example, I fired a burst at his torso, left chest, bottom right abdomen, and shoulder. Long-range combat is primarily known as OC sniping, and is where a player will sit in one position and call out their shots to the people they are firing on. The community widely discourages this. However, it should be noted that sniping at long distances is an incredibly difficult task. OC sniping is not calling your shots at a distance where your chat bubbles are not readable. OC sniping is when your character is not visible or at an extreme distance. As an aside, and as a whole, it is important to keep track of the chat and people around you while participating in combat roleplay. Any party can enter at any given time as long as they have a valid reason. See Rule 3. So one who is in combat should be aware of people typing around them. In between OC sniping and close range combat, we have combat movements. You must specify that you are moving and where to move in combat. If you ram someone, you cannot just say, I ram you. The action must be preceded by, I ran at you. Using sprinting without actions or to avoid situations that would be impossible, such as running faster than a car or running immediately from being beaten up or shot, will be acknowledged as FRP and you will be punished. When combat roleplaying, using actions like I swing to face, yes, are improper. Artificially lengthening and shortening your attacks to circumvent the no two word actions rule will also result in you being punished. This is the same for the use of improper words such as I slam his face, which can be entirely misinterpreted. We will enforce this rule with no grace period, as it should have been known since day one.
Rule 5. Fear roleplay. Fear roleplay is the act of fear and how it influences what you would or wouldn't do. An example of breaking fear RP would be if you tried to sprint at a man holding a rifle up to you. Another example could be trying to take on an entire squad of CDF by yourself. Rule 6. God modding. God modding is when you either ignore actions against your character or use unrealistic actions to avoid damage to your character. As an example, if you don't have an armor of any kind and you were shot in the chest, you wouldn't ignore it. Ignoring it would either fall to private roleplay or to god modding. Saying that you're a god/goddess, son of a god/goddess having inhumane powers like lightning bolts or magical fire hands is also a form of god modding.
Rule 6b. Power play. Power play is the act of placing repeated, unreasonable, or illogical actions in your roleplay. One would not jump into the air and do a triple spin kick, since it's physically impossible. It's important to understand that minor actions can be combined with aggressive actions in one line, such as picking up something and throwing it. It is also considered power play to use two-word actions in combat.
Rule 7. Excessive out-of-character chat. When a person or persons stay out of character, OOC, for an excessive amount of time without proper reasoning. It is acceptable to stay out of character for longer amounts of times when discussing topics important to the situation at hand. It is unacceptable to stay OOC for a long amount of time when only discussing random things that have no relevance to the roleplay. Randomly running around and jumping about is disruptive to players trying to roleplay. Please be respectful to players around you by being as least disruptive as possible when you are out of character.
Rule 7b. Shielding. Shielding is an extension of disruption and combat roleplay, where someone will intentionally go OOC to avoid being acted on or to get the best possible situation for their character. Going OOC to ask a minor specification of which side of my hip or which part of my leg is almost entirely unnecessary. If you are seen acting like this, you are liable to be moderated. Additionally, going OOC or faking being AFK until someone leaves or becomes preoccupied will also result in punishment. This is not to be confused with combat logging, which is not against the rules, due to situations in which people must leave or are disconnected via connection. Rule 8. Harassment. Constantly bothering other players after being asked to stop or making threats towards them. It should be noted that even when stopping after asked, you may still be liable for punishment.
Rule 8D, out of character harassment. Out of character harassment is harassment specifically tailored to out of character in the game and on related chat services of the game. This can range from holding a grudge over something I see to abusing someone's privacy and insulting them vehemently with no end. It also covers the wide range of topics of doxing and leaking personal information. You can and will be punished severely for these types of actions. However, OOC harassment comes in varying sides. Insulting someone in game a few times out of anger or annoyance is permissible, but following them around, ruining their roleplay, and battering them will result in a warning and further punishment if it persists. Just because a player breaks a rule does not give you reason to target them and harass them in an attempt to get them to leave the game. Please try to be understanding and helpful with new players. Witch hunting players due to prior infractions is still classified as harassment.
Rule 8C. IC harassment. IC harassment is using things such as OOC grudges as a reason to align your character against someone or target their characters for seemingly no reason. An example of this could be if player A and player B got into an argument. So player A made a character with the sole intention to pester player B. Rule 8D. Slanderous content. Slanderous content is images, chat logs, or word of mouth that has the intent to damage someone to an irreparable extent or ruin their reputation. Slanderous content is much more severe than general OOC harassment, as it involves malicious lies that are more damaging than an insult. Accusing someone of committing a crime or a morally reprehensible act without any proof otherwise will result in a single warning, and if not followed, an immediate ban with a slim chance of appeal. Slandering players is not acceptable in any sense. Rule 9. Explicit roleplay. Explicit roleplay is the act of performing inappropriate actions, both out of character and in character, that violate Roblox's terms of service. Rule 10. Trolling. Trolling is the act of being intentionally disruptive and annoying.
Rule 10B, in-character trolling. Creating a character with the sole intention of being overly annoying to players and attempting to disrupt their roleplay. Common sense should be used when creating characters. Anything deemed too unreasonable or ridiculous by an admin will result in moderation. Things such as mental illness and age are not valid excuses to act irrational. This rule also covers role-playing as inanimate objects such as logs or vending machines. An example of this could be if you made a character that wore a Darth Vader suit and ran around smacking people with a plastic lightsaber. Another example could be someone writing a 3-page lore for an insane character who thinks he is a medieval knight wearing full scrap armor and wielding a scrap sword. An example of age being a child running around attacking seals or bandits with the excuse, too young to know any better.
Rule 10C. Out of character trolling. Out of character trolling is being intentionally disruptive by intentionally abusing animations or random shooting. See Rule 1 and 1B respectively. An example of this would be if player A thought it was a funny idea to annoy player B by jumping on his or her head and randomly shooting, thus disrupting his roleplay. Rule 11. Metagaming. Meta is the use of OOC information in an IC action, such as being in a voice call and hearing that someone's character is a criminal, then arresting them afterwards despite your character never being informed ICly. It is entirely important that this rule is kept in mind at all time, as metagaming can break the immersion, feel, or fun of roleplay. Rule 11b, Metagrudging. Metagrudging is a more violent and abusive form of meta, in which a player will act hostile from OC motivation. Motives for such can range from someone killing your character to not liking the person outside of the game. A clear example of this would be making a throwaway character after your main one had been killed, only to then return to the exact spot where he or she died and slaughter the person who killed your character.
Rule 12. Exploiting. Exploiting is the use of glitches, scripts, or clients to manipulate the game environment either to troll, unlock locked content, or raise the odds in your favor. Punishments for this range according to the use and how often it is done. Scripts and client usage to exploit the game will result in an instantaneous permaban. Note that certain glitches make it difficult to differ between exploits and game glitches. If you are intentionally exploiting game glitch, it will be assumed that you are exploiting and will be punished accordingly. An example of exploiting a glitch in the game is somehow finding out how to automatically fire a weapon that shouldn't be automatic, i.e. a rocket launcher, and disrupting the other players with said glitch. However, glitching on accident will result in a warning. Feigning ignorance may also result in a temporary ban according to how abusive the action was.
Rule 13. Permissions. Permissions fall into several categories and are used to gain permission for actions that would otherwise cause errors without, such as killing or instantly KOing. A permission must either be granted by the player themselves or by an administrator under the RT permissions. PTK, permission to kill, is a fairly straightforward permission. A player will ask this when wanting permission to kill someone else's character. This can be denied or granted by the player as long as they have a reasonable denial. Reasonable denials include denying permission to kill because of a random attack, denying permission to kill because your character has a specific importance, denying permission to kill because there is no reason for the person to kill your character. PTSK. Permission to server kill is a rule mostly used on games that have a multiverse, such as Deep 6, where your character can only be killed for the existing server. It follows the same regulations as PTK. RTK, reason to kill, is a permission that only an admin can grant, in which the administrator needs to have a reason to grant it, and the person asking for RTK needs to have a reason to get it. This cannot be denied by the player in question, and can only be granted or denied by the administrator. However, a player can dispute RTK if an admin is being biased or the situation was not properly explained. RTSK, reason to server kill, has the same definition as RTK. However, this can only be used in multiverse games. It follows the same regulations as reason to kill. PTC, permission to cripple, is a permission that's not often used, but important if you plan on permanently disabling a player's character. This has the same level of expectations as PTK, including the reason to form factor. Keep in mind, PTC is for major crippling actions, not your arm and your leg being broken. Slavery falls under this rule.
Rule 14. Injuries. Injuries, as you can manage, are an inevitable thing to happen during your time role-playing. While pain is a basic idea to write out and go through, there are limitations and actions you must follow while role-playing an injury. Your character may be medically trained, but taking painkillers and bandaging yourself is not a level resolution for any wound. Performing self-surgery or acting as a surgeon as a random person is unlikely as well. You are not expected to know how to fix a bullet wound outside of first aid. As it stands now, you are permitted to time skip a doctor fixing you, but your grudges and such will not be as strong. If you are shot and you run to a doctor's office and say time skip heal, and run back to battle who just shot you, you will be punished for FRP and unfair roleplay. Damage in any form must be roleplayed. If you are hit in the face, you must react. This also follows with role-playing the damage post-injury. If your arm is broken or you're shot, you will have pains and aching from time to time.
Rule 15. Disruptive actions. Disruptive actions are typically enacted on OCLE with someone choosing to interrupt the flow of roleplay and start an unrelated conversation that lasts minutes and can separate people from the moment that they were in. This also happens ICLE, with people acting arbitrarily or without reason on someone involved in your roleplay, simply to interrupt it for their entertainment or your loss. An example, someone's running into a store with someone else when I run in and drop kick him in the head. Why'd you do that? I don't know, who cares, react. Regardless, these types of actions are not allowed. Interrupting the flow of roleplay with something completely unrelated will end in punishment. Mini-modding is also considered a disruptive action. However, do not confuse mini-modding with accusing someone of breaking a rule. Mini-modding is the intentional interruption of roleplay on technicalities or minor rule breaks/issues that do not matter. If someone is consistently breaking rules and it offends you, call an actual LPM. Do not interrupt their or others' roleplays to tell them to stop what they're doing because of something minor. Mini-modding, additionally, creates a clog in moderation with admins. If you run up to a player an admin is currently talking to and begin to insult them and list the rules they broke, you are liable for a punishment. Let moderators handle the situation. Your input, unless asked for, is not required. Rule 16. Ban evasion. Ban evading is a twofold situation. This rule can apply to evading a punishment by leaving the game and or lying to a moderator about the status of your ban, or it can apply to joining another ATF title under your ban. Evasion of a temp ban will lead to a permanent ban, and evasion of a permanent ban will lower your chances of a successful appeal. Additionally, using alternate accounts to evade your ban will likely make it improbable to successfully appeal, as you are wittingly evading your ban and misleading moderators with a false account. As a player, if an admin tells you to confirm your previous account, and you are suspected of an alt account, if you fail to do so, you may be liable for a ban until you can confirm you are not an alt of a banned player. Special cases may apply to this situation. If you can prove that you were unaware of this rule and these statuses, as they were previously unwritten, but declared as common sense, you may not be escalated to a permaban, and will be set out to serve your ban. Creating an alternate account in this case shows that you were aware of the rule and willingly chose to lie if you claim ignorance. Exploiting cannot be appealed, and evading, as with a history of exploiting, will result in an instant permaban. Rule 17. Private roleplay. Private roleplay, or PRP, is the act of intentionally ignoring other players' actions with no justification. This is not the same situation as voiding. However, private roleplay is prohibited by the game's rules as all RP is public. Refusing to roleplay with another player for no reason will result in the moderation process.
Rule 17b. Voiding. Voiding is the act of disregarding a situation or an action. Generally, voiding is done when a mistake is made or an action is incompatible. Voiding a situation must be agreed upon by both parties or overridden by an administrator. If an administrator forces you to void a situation and you do not comply, you will be punished. Voiding without another player's consent is considered private roleplaying, as you are ignoring another player for no reason. Special cases exist for this rule as well. You may void someone without secondary consent if they are clearly breaking the rules. Rule 18. NPCs. The acronym NPC stands for non-player character. This refers to any character dictated by a player or one that isn't controlled by one. Usage in-game is heavily restricted. NPCs are only allowed in very few situations, provided with the following. 1. A merchant in a store. 2. A doctor if one is not available. 3. An animal, provided that they do not interact with other players unless interacted with. NPCs are not used in any hostile manner and can only engage with a player in a minor provision-based way. However, NPCs play into the idea that a location would be restricted, such as a military base, a cordon, or other similar items, would be populated with guards, and would not be enabled to logically. Seek an admin if you want to create an event or roleplay centered around accessing these otherwise restricted areas.
Rule 19. Unapproved factions. Unapproved factions are factions that have not yet been approved by staff in the way of a vote. The application can be found in the information spreadsheet, pending. Subfactions of a faction will go through the same process and must be voted on by staff members. The guidelines of what a faction is can be found below. Unapproved factions are not to be RP'd with if they fall under any of these guidelines. 15 members is the maximum amount of members that you can have inside of your faction. Your faction is allowed to represent a higher goal besides survival as long as they do not 1. Assist or are part of any other factions, lore factions, fan factions, or unofficial fan factions, or are 2. Illogical and or break ATF's rules. Your faction is allowed to have a Discord server so long as LPMs are allowed and if requested and are given administrator in the chat to see all channels. The server cannot have more than 15 people. Discord bots don't count to this. Your faction is allowed to have uniforms so long as they are not based off of faction uniforms. Torn US CPF gear, SLF jumpsuits recolored, etc. etc. Or R2, illogical decked out military gear, knight, or other medieval armors, etc. etc. Your factions are allowed to have a hierarchy and a name. Your factions are allowed to advertise and recruit. However, you cannot break any rules by doing so. Like, spamming prop signs around the map or, spamming people in DMs. They must be local and or focus themselves entirely inside of Lake Mead. Your faction cannot be a military group or a logical militia faction. Be logical with what you are. Your faction cannot have great wealth, more than $100. This includes both supplies and money. Unofficial fan factions shouldn't be that rich. You require LPM permission and must have screenshot evidence of the LPM's username with them saying this. This will always be required and checked, so if you lie, the liar will be permanently banned and the faction will be shut down. You cannot take over a in-game location. If you occupy a game location, it is only for that server. You are allowed to make your own prop creations for your group so long as it's not illogical. You cannot have more than 15 people. This includes the founder. People unaligned with the faction do not count to this, but they cannot assist the faction in any way, shape, or form. Hired on mercenaries and things like that count as part of the group. You cannot destroy any unofficial fan faction, or lore faction. They may have conflict with them or trade with them, but this cannot be used as a way to asshole. You cannot attack any other types of faction without approval from their leaders. You cannot ally with any fan faction or official faction, but you can work with them. Alliances with other fan factions are fine, but you cannot use this as a way to destroy other factions. Alliances should only be mutually working with each other. Unofficial faction destruction requires consent from all parties involved, their leaders. Note, administration may force a faction to be destroyed if it has taken too much damage or has broken the rules in some way, shape, or form. Cannot alter after the flash's lore or overall story of the game that they are in. Note, these are only for unofficial fan factions, Rule 19. Can I have a Discord server? Yes. What unofficial fan factions can I make? You can make anything so long as it's not illogical. Some examples include caravans, raider gangs, or bandit groups, smaller mercenary groups, among other things, so long as you're not part of a larger faction, or copy a faction. Fan faction, copying as in literally their lore, not what they do. Can I name my unofficial fan faction? Yes, you can have a name. Can I have more than 15 people in my server? Yes, so long as they do not roleplay as part of your group or assist your group in any way, like hired muscle or guards, or previously mentioned mercenaries. Do LPMs count to the 15? only if they roleplay as part of your group. Lastly, can they have suited seals? No, they cannot. Howdy there, gamers. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video. Shout out to Auspicious for making voiceover for like half of the rules and sending it to me. We got this done a lot quicker because of that. So again, shout out to Auspicious. Link to his channel should be on screen now. One more thing to note, if this video does well enough, I'll probably make another video on a guide. So yeah, let me know which guide you want read next. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.